The two screens on my desk glowed in the pre-dawn darkness of my home office, casting long, dancing shadows across the wall charts of ocean currents and atmospheric pressure bands. On the left monitor, a crisp, clean interface showed the output from AccuWeather, the off-the-shelf service that had replaced me. A neat green line depicted Hurricane Iago's projected path, a graceful, gentle curve that would carry it harmlessly into the cold, empty expanse of the North Atlantic. It was a forecast that was clean, optimistic, and cheap. It was also a lie. On the right monitor was my life's work. The interface was a chaotic, beautiful mess of raw data, a sprawling dashboard of numbers, vectors, and thermal imaging I called the Chimera. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't user-friendly, but it was honest. And my model, the one I still ran for fun, the one they called outdated, showed a completely different future. It showed Iago slowing, gathering impossible strength over a hidden pocket of deep, warm water, and then making a sudden, brutal, 90-degree turn. A hook, a right hook aimed directly at the soft underbelly of the Gulf Coast, right where Trident Maritime's most valuable fleet, the Vanguard Primus convoy, was currently sailing, loaded with $1 billion in specialized drilling equipment. They were sailing into a blind spot in the world's weather data, a gap that only I could see, and they had 24 hours to change course before they crossed a point of no return. My name is Gabriel. For 30 years I was the chief meteorologist for Trident, and this is the story of how the very people who threw me away had to pray I would save them. If you've ever been made to feel obsolete, if you've ever been told your experience was a liability instead of an asset, then you know what's coming. Stick around and let me know in the comments if any of this sounds familiar. Be sure to subscribe, because this is a storm you won't want to miss. The end came not with a bang, but with the quiet, sterile click of a calendar invitation appearing on my screen. Synergy and strategy session mandatory, it read. The meeting was with Quinn, the new chief operating officer. Quinn wasn't a shipping man, he wasn't a logistics man. He was, in his own words, a paradigm shifter. He had an MBA from a school that cost more than my house, a collection of tailored Italian suits that looked shrink-wrapped onto his lean frame, and a vocabulary composed almost entirely of corporate buzzwords. He walked the halls of Trident like he was touring a factory he'd just bought for scrap. For 3 decades, my department had been the company's secret weapon. We weren't just weathermen, we were asset protectors on a global scale. My proprietary modeling system, the Chimera, wasn't just some program. It was a living, breathing digital ecosystem I had built from the ground up, brick by digital brick. It ingested every scrap of data imaginable. Standard NOAA and European center feeds, of course, but also a network of deep ocean buoys. Trident had deployed under my direction in the 90s, buoys whose data streams were exclusive to us. It cross-referenced decades of our own ship log data, finding subtle correlations between barometric pressure drops in the South China Sea and the formation of rogue waves off the coast of Africa. It even incorporated a weighted algorithm for anecdotal reports from our most experienced captains, men and women whose intuition I had learned to trust as much as any satellite image. The Chimera had saved the company, by conservative estimates, over $500 million. I remembered one incident, in 2011, when a super typhoon named Kitsana was supposed to track north of the Philippines. Every major agency agreed, but the Chimera detected a minute wobble in the upper-level steering currents, a whisper of a change that everyone else missed. It predicted the typhoon would stall and dive south, directly into the path of our entire Asia-Pacific container fleet. I made the call, a call that cost us a fortune in fuel and scheduled delays, to reroute every single vessel. The board was furious. The CEO at the time, a gruff old salt named McTavish, had me on the speakerphone, demanding to know why I was burning his money on a hunch. I just told him to trust the model. He did. Kitsana dove south, exactly as the Chimera had predicted, and wiped out 2 of our competitors' ships who had followed the official forecast. McTavish sent me a single bottle of absurdly expensive scotch with a one-word note, hunch. But McTavish was long retired. The new board, eager to impress Wall Street, had brought in Quinn to trim the fat and optimize our operational spend. And to Quinn, my department, with its dedicated servers, its data subscription fees, and its team of highly paid experienced analysts, was the fattest cut of all. I walked into the conference room. Quinn was there, flanked by a woman from human resources I'd never seen before. She had a practiced sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. Quinn didn't smile at all. He gestured to a chair. "Gabriel, thanks for coming in," he began, his tone dripping with the false sincerity of a man about to read from a script. "As you know, Trident is undergoing a significant digital transformation. We're moving towards a leaner, more agile operational model." He said agile, like it was a sacred word. "As part of that, we've reviewed all our legacy systems." He looked right at me when he said legacy, and I knew. My life's work, my masterpiece, was being rebranded as a dinosaur. "We've decided to sunset the in-house meteorological department and transition to a more cost-effective cloud-based solution. We've signed a contract with AccuWeather. Their predictive analytics are top of the line." I almost laughed. AccuWeather was the fast food of forecasting. It was a pretty app that repackaged publicly available government data. It was worthless for the kind of high-stakes precision routing we did. "Your position," he continued, glancing at the HR woman, "has been made redundant." Redundant. 30 years of service, of saving ships and lives and fortunes, reduced to a single bloodless word. I felt a strange sense of calm descend, a clarity that was almost unnerving. I had seen this storm coming on a different kind of forecast. The HR woman slid a folder across the polished table. "Here's your severance package, Gabriel. The company thanks you for your many years of service." I didn't open it. I just looked at Quinn. "And the Chimera?" I asked, my voice even. "What happens to the system?" Quinn waved a dismissive hand. "It's a legacy asset. The hardware will be decommissioned. The code is, well, it's Trident's intellectual property, of course, but frankly, it's a black box. No one can even make sense of your documentation. It's not scalable." He said it with such condescending finality. He had looked at a masterpiece of predictive science and seen nothing but an inconvenience. "I understand," I said. Those two words seemed to throw him. He was expecting a fight, an outburst, a plea. He was prepared for emotion. He had no idea how to handle quiet compliance. He exchanged a nervous glance with the HR woman. I stood up. "I'll just go clear out my desk." I walked out of that room, leaving them in a silence that was more damning than any shouting match. My team was already gone, their desks wiped clean. They hadn't even been given the courtesy of a face-to-face meeting, just a cold email and a box shipped to their homes. I was the last one. I looked around the empty office, the place that had been my second home. The hum of the servers in the chilled room next door, a sound that had been the background music to my entire adult life, now sounded like a funeral dirge. I packed my few personal belongings into a small cardboard box, a framed photo of my wife and daughter, a ridiculous coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Meteorologist," a worn-out stress ball shaped like a globe. I left the bottle of scotch from McTavish on my desk, a relic from a bygone era, an era when competence was valued. As I walked to the elevator, box in hand, I passed Quinn in the hallway. He was on his phone, laughing with someone. He didn't even look at me. It was as if I had already ceased to exist. In that moment, I realized something profound. They didn't just fire me, they erased me, and they had no idea that in doing so, they had just ripped out the eyes and ears of their entire global operation. They were sailing blind, and a hurricane was coming. The drive home was a blur. I remember the oppressive silence in the car, a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts raging in my head. Redundant, legacy. The words echoed, each one a small sharp blow. When I pulled into my driveway, I just sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, the cardboard box of my professional life sitting on the passenger seat like a tombstone. My wife, Anna, must have seen me from the window, because the front door opened, and she walked out to the car. She didn't say anything. She just opened my door, took my hand, and looked at the box. Her expression wasn't pity. It was a quiet, simmering anger that was more validating than any words could have been. She knew what that place had taken from me over the years, the missed dinners, the holidays spent glued to a screen, tracking a storm in the Indian Ocean, the sheer weight of responsibility, and she knew what I had given it in return. That night, I retreated to my home office. This was my sanctuary, a room filled not with corporate-approved furniture, but with the comfortable clutter of genuine intellectual curiosity. Books on fluid dynamics and chaos theory were stacked high. Old beautiful brass barometers and sextants, collected over a lifetime, gleamed on the shelves, and in the center of it all, my personal command center, a rig of 4 monitors connected to a dedicated server rack humming quietly in the closet. This was the true home of the Chimera. The version at Trident had been powerful, but this was my private laboratory. It was unshackled from the company's budget restrictions and IT policies. It ran on processors I'd overclocked myself, and was connected to data feeds I paid for out of my own pocket, specialized satellite services and academic networks that were too esoteric for the corporate world. For years, I had used it for research and development, pushing the model, teaching it new tricks, making it smarter, faster, more intuitive. Now, it was just a hobby, a relic. I found myself performing a familiar ritual, one that had always centered me, making coffee, not with some pod machine, but with a meticulousness that mirrored my scientific process. I weighed the beans, a single origin geisha from Panama, to the 1/10 of a gram. I ground them by hand, the rhythmic crunching sound a small anchor in the chaos of my mind. I heated the water to precisely 205 degrees Fahrenheit. I placed the filter in the ceramic pour-over cone, and rinsed it, the smell of hot paper, a prelude to the rich aroma to come. As I poured the hot water over the grounds in a slow, deliberate spiral, watching the bloom of carbon dioxide, I felt the rage begin to recede, replaced by a cold, heavy sadness. 30 years. I thought back to the beginning, a young, green meteorologist fresh out of university, full of theories and ambition. Trident had been a much smaller company then, run by men who had actually worked on the decks of ships. They understood the terrifying, absolute power of the ocean. They had hired me to start a real weather department, because the founder had lost his own brother to a squall in the North Sea that no one saw coming. The first version of the Chimera was built on a clunky IBM mainframe, in a dusty room in the basement. It wasn't even a model really, just a database. I spent years, my first decade at the company, not writing code, but talking to people. I sat with grizzled old captains in smoky portside bars from Singapore to Rotterdam, listening to their stories. They spoke of the sea not as a scientist would, but as a living thing. They talked about the way the waves sounded the night before a storm, the specific color of the sunset that meant bad weather was 500 miles away, the way the seabirds would vanish. I took it all in. I started a project to digitize every captain's log in the company's 100-year history. I fed it all into the machine, decades of handwritten notes on wind speed, wave height, engine performance in heavy seas, cargo shifts. It was a mountain of what a modern data scientist would call unstructured data. It was noise, but I believed that inside that noise was a signal. The first real breakthrough came when I started correlating that historical, anecdotal data with hard satellite imagery. The Chimera began to learn. It started to see patterns that defied conventional meteorological theory. It could predict the formation of rogue waves by identifying a specific confluence of 3 separate swell patterns that, on their own, looked harmless. It learned that a certain kind of atmospheric haze, visible only in the infrared spectrum over the coast of Brazil, was a near-perfect 7-day predictor of equipment-damaging storms in the Caribbean. This was the black box Quinn had dismissed so casually. It wasn't just code. It was distilled experience. It was the wisdom of 1,000 sea captains encoded into silicon. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Elena. She was my protege, a brilliant data scientist I had hired right out of college. I had seen in her the same fire, the same curiosity that I'd had. I had mentored her, taught her the soul of the Chimera, not just its command lines. Her text was short. They're making me train my replacement.
He asked me where the make forecast button was. I quit. I'm sorry, Gabriel. I felt a pang of guilt. I had brought her into that world, but her message was followed by another. Heard they gave you the boot. Their loss. Let me know when you start your own shop. I'm in. A small spark ignited in the cold emptiness. Loyalty. It was a currency Quinn and his kind would never understand. For weeks I drifted. I tried to enjoy my forced retirement. I spent more time with Anna. I worked in my garden, but my eyes were always drawn back to the screens in my office. I kept the chimera running. I told myself it was just to keep my skills sharp, a habit too ingrained to break. But I think deep down, I was waiting. I was watching, because I knew, with the certainty of a man who had stared into the heart of 1,000 storms, that you cannot cheat the ocean. Competence isn't cheap, but the price of incompetence is eventually paid in full. Then it appeared, a small, unassuming cluster of thunderstorms off the Cape Verde Islands. On the AccuWeather map, it was a footnote, a tropical depression given a number but not yet a name. The official forecast from the National Hurricane Center showed it tracking northwest, a typical fish storm that would spin itself out over the Atlantic. But the Chimera saw something different. It flagged a variable that no other model was tracking, a deep underlying river of warm ocean water, the oceanic equivalent of a lit fuse, running far beneath the surface. It was a relic of a previous season's El Niño, a pocket of thermal energy that should have dissipated months ago. The generic models, which only looked at the surface temperature, missed it completely. The Chimera, with its access to our old proprietary buoy data that was still being transmitted, even though no one at Trident was looking at it anymore, saw it clear as day. I watched for 3 days as the storm, now named Iago, followed the official path. It grew into a Category 1 hurricane, then a Category 2. Everything looked normal. Quinn was probably feeling smug. He had saved the company millions in my department's budget, and the new cheap system was working just fine. On the 4th day, Elena called me. Not a text this time, a voice call. Her tone was tense. "Gabriel, you seeing this?" she asked. "The Vanguard Primus convoy. They're routing it south of Iago's track. Standard procedure, but they're cutting it fine, trying to save fuel. Quinn is pushing the captains to aggressively optimize the route." Aggressively optimize. Another one of his infuriating phrases. It meant taking stupid risks to make a spreadsheet look good. What's the cargo, Elena? Top of the line deep sea drilling equipment for that new rig in the Gulf. The manifest is insane. It's got to be over $1 billion, maybe more. And the CEO is crowing about it to investors, promising on-time delivery. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I looked at my screen. The Chimera was now flashing a high probability warning. The warm water anomaly, combined with a developing high-pressure ridge to the north, was creating the perfect conditions for a catastrophic directional shift. The model was no longer predicting a gentle curve. It was screaming, in its silent language of data, that Iago was about to perform a textbook hook maneuver. It would stall, rapidly intensify to a Category 4, maybe even a 5. And pivot directly towards the Gulf of Mexico.
Directly into the optimized path of the Vanguard Primus. The catalyst wasn't a phone call from a client or an offer from a competitor. It was the data itself. The cold, brutal, elegant mathematics of my life's work telling me that a disaster of our own making was about to happen, and the only person on earth who knew it was me. My resolve hardened. This wasn't about getting even with Quinn. It wasn't about revenge. The time for that might come later. This was about the men and women on those ships. It was about the captains who had trusted me for decades. It was about the simple, undeniable fact that I knew the truth, and I had a moral obligation to act. I looked at the two screens, the lie and the truth, side by side. They had erased me from the company, but they couldn't erase my knowledge. They mistook my loyalty to the company for a lack of personal conviction, a fatal error. I saved the latest Chimera projection, a detailed multi-layered file showing the next 72 hours of Iago's life. The plan began to form, not a plan for revenge, but a plan for intervention, a quiet coup, executed from the solitude of my office. The problem was immense, a strategic nightmare. I had the truth, but I had no authority. If I sent my data through official channels, it would land on Quinn's desk. He would see it as an attack, the desperate act of a disgruntled former employee. He'd bury it, delete the email, and probably use it as justification for some kind of legal action against me for retaining company data. I couldn't go to the board. They were the ones who'd hired Quinn. They believed in his gospel of disruption. I couldn't go to the press. By the time any journalist understood the technical nuances and got a story published, the fleet would already be fighting for its life. The window was closing. 24 hours. After that, the convoy would be in the kill box, too deep into the storm's eventual path to escape the worst of its fury. My leverage wasn't just the data from the Chimera. My real leverage, the asset they could never list on a balance sheet, was my network. It was the trust I had built over 30 years. One handshake, one honest forecast, one life-saving call at a time. My first move was to solidify my intelligence. I called Elena back. "I need you to be my eyes, not my hands," I told her, making it clear I wasn't asking her to steal anything or break any rules. "Just tell me what you can see from your desk. What's the chatter? What's the official line?" "The official line is that Iago is a textbook fish storm," she said, her voice low. "Quinn is actually preparing a presentation for the board's quarterly review. He's using it as a case study for the cost-effectiveness of AccuWeather. He's bragging that they're saving 2 days on the Vanguard Primus's transit time compared to your conservative routing models." The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. He was going to use their impending doom as a success story. "The cargo manifests, Elena. Can you see them?" "I still have access to the logistics portal. They haven't revoked my credentials yet." "It's not just drilling equipment, Gabriel. It's custom fabricated, irreplaceable stuff. If they lose this cargo, the entire Gulf project is set back by at least a year, maybe more. The penalty clauses in the contract are brutal." That was it. That was the financial artery. This wasn't just about one convoy, it was about the company's flagship project for the next decade. "Okay, Elena, don't do anything else. Don't access anything you shouldn't. Just listen. If you hear anything at all, you call me. And for God's sake, be careful." My next step was to create an insurance policy. I spent 2 hours meticulously documenting everything. I ran the Chimera simulation again, this time recording the process, showing its inputs and outputs, narrating the scientific justification for its prediction. I compiled a data package, a compressed file containing the raw buoy data, the historical precedents for hook storms in that sector, and the minute-by-minute projection of Iago's turn and intensification. It was an irrefutable digital dossier, a self-contained proof of my warning. I encrypted it and uploaded it to a secure cloud server, then emailed the access key to my personal lawyer with a simple cryptic instruction: "Hold this. Do not open unless you hear from me, or I become unavailable." Then I picked up the phone and made a call that was both a piece of reconnaissance and the planting of a time bomb. I dialed a number in London. "Martin, it's Gabriel Thorne." Martin Davies was a senior risk assessor at Lloyd's, the consortium that held the insurance policy on Trident's entire fleet. We weren't friends, but we were professionals who had developed a deep mutual respect over 2 decades of navigating complex claims and policies. "Gabriel, heard you'd retired. Taking up golf," he said, his voice a warm, plummy baritone. "Something like that," I said. "Listen, Martin, this is a hypothetical, a question for an old friend, not official business. I'm all ears. Hypotheticals are my bread and butter." Hypothetically, I began choosing my words with extreme care. What would Lloyd's position be if a shipping company, let's call them Company X, transitioned from a proven proprietary risk forecasting system to a cheaper, generic, off-the-shelf product? And what if, hypothetically, a senior expert with a multi-decade track record of accuracy provided a direct warning about a specific, imminent, and catastrophic weather event, a warning based on data that only the proprietary system could see? And what if Company X, under its new management, chose to ignore that warning, leading to a significant billion-dollar loss? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in Martin's head, the calculations of liability and negligence clicking into place. "Gabriel," he finally said, his voice stripped of its earlier bonhomie, "that is a very interesting hypothetical. Off the record, that would move the event from an act of God's into the realm of gross negligence. It could potentially void the coverage entirely. The liability would be astronomical. The directors and officers themselves could be held personally liable." "I thought so," I said. "Just a thought experiment." "Good talking to you, Martin." "Gabriel," he said before I could hang up, "this isn't just a thought experiment, is it?" "Enjoy your day, Martin," I said, and ended the call. The seed was planted. I hadn't blown the whistle, not yet. I had simply made the insurer aware that a storm was coming, and it might not be the one they were tracking on their weather maps. The final piece of the plan was the most critical and the most dangerous. I had to bypass the entire corporate structure. I had to go directly to the tip of the spear. I had to talk to the captain. The master of the Vanguard Primus was a woman named Eva Rostova. Eva was Trident's finest, a steely-eyed Estonian. She had worked her way up from a deckhand on a rusty Baltic freighter to the command of the most advanced vessel in the fleet. I had known her for 20 years. I had mentored her when she was a first mate, teaching her how to read the subtle language of the sea, how to trust her instruments, but also trust her gut. She was old school. She valued experience over theory, and more importantly, she trusted me. Getting to her was the challenge. All official communications to the ship were routed through and logged at corporate headquarters. A call or an email from me would be instantly flagged. But years ago, after a communications blackout during a storm in the Pacific, I had insisted that all senior captains have a private encrypted satellite phone for absolute emergencies, a direct line, off the corporate grid. I had their numbers in a small black book in the bottom drawer of my desk, a book Quinn's digital transformation had never thought to look for. My heart hammered against my ribs as I dialed the number. This was the point of no return. I was about to ask a decorated captain to defy her orders, to risk her career, her license, her entire future, based on my word alone. The phone rang, a strange, ethereal sound that had bounced off a satellite 22,000 miles above the Earth. After 4 rings, she answered. Her voice was clipped, professional. "Rostova." "Eva, it's Gabriel Thorne." There was a pause, not of confusion, but of surprise and immediate focus. She knew this was not a social call. "Gabriel," she said, her voice dropping slightly, "this is an unsanctioned channel. What is it?" I didn't waste time. "Iago is not going to curve. It's a hook storm. My model shows it making a hard turn for the Gulf in the next 12 hours. It will undergo rapid intensification to Category 4, possibly higher. You are sailing directly into its path. The official forecast is wrong." Silence. I could picture her on the bridge, the dim glow of the instruments on her face. Her eyes narrowed in concentration. She was processing the information, weighing the source. "Your model?" she asked. "The Chimera. I'm still running it. Trident Command has us on an optimized route. They are confident in the ACO weather projection. They say you are no longer with the company." "I am not," I said. "That's why I'm calling you. They are flying blind, Eva. They bought a pretty dashboard and threw out the engine. You have to change course. You need to turn due south now. Put at least 400 nautical miles between you and your current position." This was the moment. She could hang up. She could report me. She could follow her orders and trust the system that paid her salary. "Send me the data," she said, her voice firm, decisive. "Send it to my personal terminal, not the ship's system, and give me a plausible excuse." A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. She trusted me. "Engine trouble," I said, instantly. "A vibration in the port side propeller shaft. You need to reduce speed and head for calmer seas to run a diagnostic. It's untraceable, unprovable, and gives you complete authority to alter course for the safety of the vessel. Go dark on the main comms channel. Use this line only." "Understood," she said. "Sending the data now," I replied. I hit send on my computer, transmitting the encrypted data package directly to her.
Godspeed, Eva. You too, Gabriel, she said. And the line went dead. I leaned back in my chair, my hand trembling slightly. The first move had been made. The pieces were in motion. Across the Atlantic, a billion-dollar convoy was about to vanish from the corporate map, executing a silent turn, based on the word of a man who officially no longer existed. And in the boardroom of Trident Maritime, a smug CAO was about to find out what happens when you ignore the man who can see in the dark. The next few hours were the longest of my life. I sat in my office, the two monitors, a stark diptych of my new reality. On the left, AccuWeather's neat green line held its confident, ignorant curve. On the right, the Chimera's chaotic, beautiful data streams showed the hurricane beginning to slow, almost imperceptibly, as it drew power from the deep, warm water it was now hovering over. The turn hadn't started yet, but the conditions were perfect. It was like watching a snake coil before it strikes. I brewed 3 more pots of coffee, the ritual the only thing keeping my frayed nerves from completely unraveling. There was nothing more I could do but wait. Wait for a ship captain I hadn't seen in person in 3 years to risk her entire career. Wait for a storm 1,000 miles away to obey the laws of physics. I knew it would. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Elena. Her voice was a hurried whisper. "It's starting," she said. "The Port Authority in Galveston just called. They're asking about our contingency plans for a potential Gulf storm." The ops manager, a guy named Henderson, laughed at them. He told them their data was wrong, that Trident's new system showed 0 risk. The arrogance was breathtaking. They weren't just ignoring the danger, they were mocking those who could see it. Then Elena continued. A call came in from the regional VP. He wanted an updated ETA for the Vanguard Primus. Henderson tried to pull up their live position on the AccuWeather Fleet Management portal. "Gabriel, it's not there." I felt a grim smile touch my lips. What did he see? Nothing. A vessel data unavailable error. He tried the secondary tracking. Same thing. He's starting to sweat. He tried to raise Captain Rostova on the primary comms channel. No response. He tried the emergency frequency. Static. I could picture the scene perfectly. The slow dawning horror in a mid-level manager's office. The frantic clicking of a mouse. The growing realization that a billion-dollar asset had simply vanished from the map. "Quinn's office has been notified," Elena said. "They think it's a technical glitch with the new system. They've got some IT kid, the one who replaced me, trying to re-establish the data handshake. He thinks the ship's transponder is malfunctioning. They were looking for a technical problem because they were incapable of imagining a human one. They couldn't conceive that a captain would deliberately disobey them. It wasn't in their spreadsheet." 2 more hours crawled by.
The National Hurricane Center issued a special update. Their own models were starting to pick up on the wobble. They adjusted Iago's projected track, shifting the famous cone of uncertainty slightly south. It was still predicted to curve out to sea, but the turn was now projected to be sharper, closer to the coast. It was the first crack in the official story. AccuWeather's system, which likely only updated its core model every 6 hours to save on processing costs, still showed the old gentle curve. Quinn's state-of-the-art system was already hours behind reality. The panic at Trident must have been escalating exponentially. A missing fleet was bad enough. A missing fleet with a hurricane now showing the first signs of erratic behavior was a full-blown crisis. My private satellite phone buzzed to life. It was Eva. "The data is compelling," she said, her voice strained but steady. "We are 200 nautical miles due south of our previous course. We're citing engine diagnostics and maintaining radio silence as ordered. The crew is on edge, but they trust me." "How certain are you, Gabriel?" 100%, I said, without a flicker of hesitation. "The turn will begin within the next 3 hours. The intensification will be rapid. By nightfall it will be a monster." "Acknowledged," she said. "We're burning a lot of fuel, and we'll miss our delivery window. Corporate is going to crucify me if you're wrong. They'll build a statue of you if I'm right," I replied. She gave a short, sharp laugh. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." Rostova out. The silent takeover was complete. I had, from my quiet suburban office, effectively seized control of the company's most valuable asset. I hadn't hacked a single system or broken a single law. I had simply leveraged a currency more valuable than any stock-priced trust. The public reveal came sooner than I expected. It wasn't a press release from me, it was a bulletin from the United States Coast Guard. They issued a marine advisory for the entire Gulf of Mexico. A hurricane that was supposed to be a non-event was now behaving unpredictably. They specifically mentioned that they were attempting to contact the Vanguard Primus convoy, which was last reported to be in the storm's potential path, but had been unresponsive for several hours. The story was picked up by maritime news outlets, then by financial news wires. The narrative was no longer Quinn's to control. He wasn't the master of disruptive technology anymore. He was the COO who had lost a fleet. Trident's stock, which had been stable all day, began to quiver in after-hours trading. Investors, like nature, abhor a vacuum, and the company had just created a massive one in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. By late afternoon, the storm made its move. On my screen, I watched the vectors shift. The turn was sharp, violent, and utterly decisive. Iago was no longer moving northwest. It was heading due west on a direct course for the Louisiana coast, and it was feeding, drawing power from that hidden well of energy, its eye wall tightening, its wind speeds climbing at a terrifying rate. The National Hurricane Center issued another, more frantic update, officially shifting the track to a Gulf landfall. Their forecast now mirrored what the Chimera had been showing for the past 18 hours. The phones at Trident must have been melting down. Quinn's carefully constructed world of buzzwords and bottom lines had just collided with the raw, unforgiving reality of a Category 4 hurricane. He had placed his faith in a cheap app, and it had led him to the edge of a cliff. Now he was standing at that edge, staring into the abyss, and I was the only person who knew what was at the bottom. He had no idea where his ships were. He had a monster storm bearing down on his delivery port, and he had to be realizing with a cold, sickening dread that the redundant old man he'd fired was the only one who had seen it coming. The power had shifted. He just didn't know how much yet. The night was a symphony of destruction. I watched on the news as Hurricane Iago, now a borderline Category 5 storm, slammed into the Louisiana coastline. The winds, just as the Chimera had predicted, were catastrophic. The storm surge was devastating. The port of Galveston, where the Vanguard Primus was supposed to be docking, was submerged. Warehouses were torn to shreds, cranes twisted into modern art sculptures. The images were apocalyptic. And somewhere out in the calm, safe waters of the South Atlantic, Eva Rostova and her crew were watching the same images, safe and sound. The next morning, the story broke. A reporter from a major maritime trade journal, likely tipped off by a grateful and loyal member of Eva's crew, published an article with a headline that sent shockwaves through the industry. Trident Fleet evades Iago's hook after covert warning. The article detailed, with stunning accuracy, how the Vanguard Primus had broken from its company-approved route hours before the storm's unexpected turn, following a private warning from a source with deep knowledge of the region's unique meteorological conditions. It didn't name me, but it didn't have to. Everyone in the business knew who had that kind of knowledge. The article painted Captain Rostova as a hero who had risked her career to save her ship, and it implicitly painted Trident's management as incompetent fools who had sailed their fleet into the jaws of a monster. The power shift was no longer silent. It was now the lead story on every shipping news site in the world. Then came the exodus. My phone started buzzing, and it didn't stop. The first call was from Elena. "I'm out," she said. "I just sent my resignation email, not just to HR but to the entire logistics department. I told them I was leaving to join a new consultancy, one that believes in data, not dogma." Before I could even respond, a text came in from another member of my old team, a brilliant wave modeling expert named Sam. "Heard you might be starting something new. If you need a wave guy, I'm available as of now." One by one they came. The core of my old department, the analysts and scientists I had personally hired and trained, the people who understood the soul of the Chimera, resigned. It was a mass walkout, a vote of no confidence, not just in Quinn, but in the entire philosophy that had taken over the company. They weren't just quitting, they were defecting. They were coming to me, a general with no army, who suddenly had his elite forces reporting for duty. The most significant call came that afternoon. It was from the CEO of C-Lane Global, Trident's largest and most aggressive competitor. He was a shrewd, no-nonsense man named Marcus Thorne, no relation, but a delicious irony. "Gabriel," he said, his voice direct and to the point, "I just read the story about the Vanguard Primus. I've been competing against your forecasts for 15 years, and frankly, I'm sick of losing. I don't know what you're planning, but C-Lane would be very interested in acquiring your services, exclusively." I told him I was considering my options. I told him I'd be in touch. I was no longer just a disgruntled employee. I was a strategic asset, and the market was starting to realize it. The final, inevitable call came just after 5 o'clock. My phone screen lit up with a number I recognized, Trident's main switchboard. I let it ring 4 times, then answered, my voice calm and neutral. "Gabriel Thorne." "Gabriel, it's Quinn." His voice was a pathetic wreck, a frantic, high-pitched squeal that was a world away from the cool, condescending executive who had fired me. The suit was gone, metaphorically speaking. This was just a panicked man in a burning building of his own design. "Quinn, I'm surprised to hear from you." "Don't play games with me, Thorne," he shrieked. "What did you do? You sabotaged us. You colluded with Rostova. This is corporate espionage. I'll have you in court for the rest of your life. Our lawyers will." I cut him off. My voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it sliced through his hysteria like a razor. "Quinn, stop. Just stop talking and listen. First, Captain Rostova acted on a credible good faith warning to ensure the safety of her vessel and crew, an action that is fully within her authority as master of the ship. Any lawsuit you file will involve putting her on the stand, where she will be rightly hailed as a hero who saved $1 billion asset from your incompetence. How do you think that will look for you?" Silence. "Second," I continued, "I have a time-stamped, fully documented record of my forecast, created 24 hours before the storm even turned. I also have a very interested friend at Lloyd's of London, a man named Martin Davies, who is extremely curious as to why Trident knowingly ignored expert advice and sailed directly into a forecasted disaster. He used the term gross negligence. I believe he also mentioned something about your directors and officers being held personally liable." I could hear his sharp intake of breath. The mention of Lloyd's, of personal liability, was the kill shot. His threats of lawsuits evaporated into the pathetic bluff they were. His tone shifted instantly, from rage to desperate, pleading manipulation. "Look, Gabriel, okay, maybe we were a little hasty," he stammered. "The board, they were putting pressure on me to cut costs. You know how it is, but you've made your point. You were right, we were wrong. So, let's fix this. We want you to come back. We'll give you your old job back. No better, a new title. Vice President of Risk Mitigation, a raise, double what you were making. We'll scrap the AccuWeather contract. You can rebuild your team, bring back anyone you want. We need you, Gabriel." I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment, savoring it. He had thrown away a king, and now he was trying to buy him back with a handful of beads. "Let me be very clear, Quinn," I said, my voice as cold and hard as the heart of a glacier. "There isn't enough money in your entire company to get me to work for you. You didn't value my competence, you only valued the cost. Well, you're about to learn the true cost of what you lost." I hung up the phone. The power shift was complete. He had nothing left. No leverage, no threats, no hope. He was just a man at a desk, waiting for the consequences to arrive. The final confrontation wasn't in a boardroom. It wasn't a dramatic showdown. It was a quiet, almost anticlimactic phone call a week later. Quinn had been fired, of course. The board had made him the scapegoat, a necessary sacrifice to appease the furious investors and the even more furious insurers at Lloyd's. The CEO, the man who had hired Quinn and signed off on his disastrous plan, had announced his early retirement to spend more time with his family. Trident's stock was in free fall. They were facing nine-figure lawsuits from the Port Authority and their own clients. The new interim COO, a shell-shocked lifer from the finance department, was the one who called me. His name was Arthur, a man I had known for years, a decent man who was now tasked with cleaning up an impossible mess. "Gabriel," he said, his voice weary, "I'm not going to waste your time with empty apologies. What Quinn did was inexcusable. We're in a very bad place. The board has authorized me to make you an offer, a significant one, to come back and help us right the ship." I listened patiently as he laid it out: a staggering salary, a seat on the board, an equity stake in the company. It was the kind of offer they should have made 10 years ago. It was everything I had ever deserved, and it meant nothing to me now. "Arthur," I said, and my voice was not unkind, "I appreciate the call, I really do, but you're missing the point. You're trying to buy back my model, my system, but that's not what you lost. You lost trust, you lost credibility, and you lost the culture that made my work possible. You can't buy that back with a stock offering." "What are you going to do, Gabriel?" he asked, a note of genuine despair in his voice. "I'm starting my own firm," I told him. "Chimera Maritime Analytics. Elena is my co-founder. My entire old team is already on board. Our first client, a consortium of shipping guilds, represented by Captain Ross Deva, signed with us yesterday. Our second client, Sea Lane Global, is finalizing their contract this afternoon. And our third, a very motivated insurance underwriter from London, is helping us secure our first round of seed funding. He seems to believe we represent a best-in-class risk mitigation asset." Arthur was silent. He understood. I hadn't just left. I had taken the entire ecosystem with me: the talent, the clients, the trust. I had asset stripped his company of its most valuable intangible resource, its brain. "I see," he said softly. "Well, good luck, Gabriel. You too, Arthur. You're going to need it." I hung up the phone. My vindication wasn't in seeing Quinn fired or the company flounder. It was in the act of building something new from the ashes of the old. It was in the quiet confidence of knowing my own worth. The news of Quinn's final, pathetic fate came a month later, not from an internal memo, but from Elena, who had seen it on a social media site. He'd landed a job as a regional manager for a chain of self-storage facilities. From a chief operating officer of a global shipping giant to a manager of suburban garages, the market had corrected itself. He hadn't been defeated by some grand vengeful scheme. He had simply been rendered irrelevant by his own incompetence, a victim of the very efficiency he worshipped. The new reality, my new reality, was my new office. It wasn't a corner suite on the 50th floor. It was a modest open-plan space in a converted warehouse district, buzzing with the electric energy of a true startup. The smell of fresh paint and strong coffee hung in the air. Elena was at a massive whiteboard, sketching out a new data integration architecture, arguing happily with Sam about wave refraction algorithms. The rest of my team was clustered around monitors, their faces alive with purpose and excitement. They weren't just employees anymore. They were partners. I sat at my simple desk, looking out the large window at the bustling port. My coffee mug, the one that said "World's Okayest Meteorologist," sat next to my keyboard. I was on a video conference call, not with one client, but with the heads of 5 major shipping lines, including Trident's biggest rivals. They weren't just signing contracts. They were bidding against each other for a minority stake in my new company. On the screen, I could see Captain Ava Rostova patched in from her bridge somewhere in the Pacific. She caught my eye and gave me a small knowing smile. There was no gloating, no "I told you so." There was just a quiet, profound sense of balance, of a world set right. The arrogant had been humbled, the competent had been rewarded, and the storm had passed. I still look at that coffee mug sometimes. "World's Okayest Meteorologist." It was a joke, a gift from my daughter years ago. But now, it feels like a symbol of something more. It's a reminder that titles don't matter. The corner office,
The fancy business cards, the talk of synergy and paradigms, it's all just noise. What matters is what you can do, what you know, the value you can create when no one is watching. They mistook my loyalty for obedience. They saw 30 years of service and called it a legacy cost. They looked at a system built on a lifetime of experience and called it a black box. They didn't understand that experience isn't something you can just download like an app. It's built, day by day, mistake by mistake, success by success. It's the one asset that a man like Quinn can never buy and will never possess. In the end, this wasn't really a story about revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy, emotional thing. This was about something colder, cleaner, and far more satisfying. It was about correction. It was a demonstration of a fundamental law of the professional world, a law as real as any law of physics. Competence is the ultimate leverage. They thought they could save money by replacing a master craftsman with a cheap tool, and they learned the hard way that the most expensive thing in the world is a cheap solution to a complex problem. So I'm telling you this directly to you. If you've ever been overlooked, if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been made to feel like a relic in a world obsessed with the next new thing, remember this story. Your knowledge, your experience, your quiet, steady competence, that is your power. Don't ever let anyone tell you it's obsolete. Value is not determined by the person who signs your paycheck. It's determined by the problems you can solve. And in the end, the world will always have problems that need solving. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt undervalued at your job, I want to hear about it. Let me know your story in the comments below, because I read every single one. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and of course hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more stories about competence and a little bit of karma winning the day.